being a Christian is more than just sitting in a circle and, knitting. This is about doing God's work in the world. This is about God asking me to step out in faith and try something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
I've often said the old dismiss the young ignore the old, and there's too much lost in the middle.
What was the moment when you knew you were a real man? And you know what the responses are, Michael, unfortunately? The first time I got drunk. How sad is that?
Welcome to the broadcast. This is Michael Easley inContext, and my guest today, Paul Pettit, Dr. Pettit, longtime friend. We have the same alma mater at Dallas Theological Seminary. You remember the brown sign, Dallas Theological Seminary?
Yeah, absolutely. Swiss Avenue.
I had a friend that wanted to get a piece of brown acetate and cover up the O so that it said Dallas Theological Seminary. We should have done it. And that's a double entendre, as you well know. But anyway, Paul has been, how long have you been at Dallas now?
Wow, 27 years now.
Goodness gracious. Lots of hats, lots of roles there, spiritual formation and leadership, pastoral ministries department. You teach classes there as well. This is your, fourth book?
Yeah, about fifth book, yeah.
Fifth book? Okay. The new book is called A Courageous Identity. And, Paul, in recent, I'd say months, we've had a lot of authors and contributors that are trying to reinstigate young men and middle-aged men to say, step up to the plate, be courageous. Don't be a smile at the future has always been my line. You don't have to be angry about being a man. But there's certainly been a vilification of men and probably draw a little flashback, but white men in particular. We take a lot of heat. Some maybe is appropriate, some inappropriate. Anyway, so you've written a book subtitled Accepting the Call of Christ-Centered Masculinity. From your estimation, Paul, when did masculinity start taking a hit and a fallout?
Well, what happened was, as you probably know, Dr. Easley, in the 1970s, a form of second wave feminism came into our culture. And a lot of university feminists said, the problem with you young men is your masculinity. If you would just act more feminine, then our society, our culture would be a lot nicer, a lot calmer, a lot more loving. But, the scriptures say that God created male and female and that it was good. So we know that, what they say is there's some bad men out there. There's some really toxic men out there. And there is some toxic masculinity out there. But what they did was they said masculinity itself is bad. You see the move there? They said masculinity itself is bad. Not that, there aren't great men out there or that masculinity itself can't be redeemed. They made the move to say you should be feminine. And so that masculinity itself should be thrown out. So what we've done in the last few years, as you've mentioned, is people are writing and saying, wait a minute, masculinity itself is not bad. Masculinity can be courageous. Masculinity can protect people. Masculinity, Jesus served others. Jesus had all the authority in the world. If you have all the authority in heaven and you have all the authority on earth, how much authority do you have? You have all the authority. But what did Jesus do? He put a towel over his arm. He washed the disciples' feet. He served. He went. How did he treat his bride? He died for his bride. And so a good husband, a great dad, serves his family, loves his family, protects his family. So we want to recover masculinity and say that it takes courage in today's culture to stand up and say, no, I want to be masculine. I want to be a male. I want to be a Christ-centered male. I don't want to practice toxic masculinity, but I want to practice Christ-centered masculinity.
We saw in the Christian news world in the last 8 to 10 years some of the scandals around some of the men, and unfortunately within the Baptist circles was most prominent. And along with this, we had complementarian versus egalitarian issues. You and I were well versed in that debate. As Wayne Grudem and John Piper said, we won the war, but we lost the local church battle. And so egalitarian, which for folks that aren't familiar with those terms, it's equal value, equal role, simply, and then complementarian, equal value, distinct role.
Yeah.
And Paul, you'd appreciate this. Sometime back, my daughter and I do a short format thing called Ask Dr. E. And we did this little clip, and I said, the evangelical church has overstated submission and headship as roles. Mm-hmm. I argue they're responses to the God-given position we have. So you pointed out Christ died for the church. He didn't lord over the church and mandate and say, submit to me. And so when I read Ephesians 5, for example, to be a loving leader is to die for Cindy, take care of her needs, care for her, put her needs first, if I take Philippians seriously, not to say, submit to me, woman.
Right.
And if submission was a role, it'd just be yes, sir. Mm-hmm. There'd be no the interaction or relationship. Yes. I mean, I'm going to submit to whatever the husband says. So submission and headship are responses to a God-given role, not the role itself. And boy, did I take flack for that.
I like that. You see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's praying. He's trying to get his disciples to pray with him, but they're asleep. But he says, Lord, Father, if there's some other way to do this, I'm about that. He literally says, if there's some other way to take the cup, I'm open to that. Show me that. And then, though, the most beautiful words in Scripture, nevertheless. And this is the mindset. The mindset is, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And Jesus shows a beautiful submission to the Father. And we can do that. We can submit to authorities. We can submit to the policeman who pulls me over. So submission itself is not ugly. Submission is not, toxic. It can be beautiful. And I have to submit to the elders in my church. I have to submit to my bosses here at Dallas Seminary. So submission itself is not ugly or wrong. It's the person in authority has to have a loving mindset, a service mindset. How can I build up my team? The greatest coaches, say, hey, I want to serve you guys. I want to help you win a championship. So they're the coach, they're the leader of the team, but their goal is making the players better. The coach of the Knicks was like, hey, we got to beat the Spurs. We're going to win the NBA title. Let's work as a team. I'll give you guys good advice, but hey, I'm here to coach you guys up. And so he wasn't lording it over the team. He was helping his team win.
Maybe he should have lorded it over him a little bit more.
That's right. The Knicks, downtown New York City.
A little bitter for you Texas guys.
Yeah.
Let's take a step back. In the local church, I was in a local church basically for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
If women stopped being involved, the local church would die.
Absolutely.
Because women do so much work. And then we have the office of elder and senior pastor, sometimes designated as male only, which I think is an appropriate cultural, biblical articulation. But even there, Paul, you see men are reticent to lead.
Yeah.
Men are reticent to help. And it might be anything from security to grounds to working with kids to, you name it. And so what? Women step in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the elders ought to be leading. The elders, according to Scripture, male. And I think the senior pastor should be an elder. The senior pastor should be one of the elders. So they ask, can women be senior pastors? Well, I think men should be elders and the senior pastor should be an elder. So that kind of answers that. But this goes back to Adam. Adam was supposed to be on duty. Adam was supposed to be coaching Eve and telling her, don't eat. But he shirked his responsibilities. So, we come from a long line of this, Michael. We go way back to our father, Adam, who stood by when he should have been stepping up. And
was
so
that Temper Longman's book, or Allender, The Silence of Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem is, it's easy to go passive. Robert Lewis in Fayetteville, Arkansas says, reject passivity, because that's a default mode. A lot of men are like, what, she wants to plan the vacation, I'll let her. It's easy to go passive. It's harder to step up and serve and lead. So it takes courage. That's why I call it a courageous identity. It takes courage to go, I want to lead in the church. And a lot of young churches don't have a pathway to leadership. They don't have a discipleship pathway. They don't have an elder pathway. So a lot of young men are like, I don't know how you lead around here. No one's asked me or no one's mentored me. You know, we had the same couple of mentors, Chuck Swindoll and Howard Hendricks. They told Howard Hendricks used to come into our floor and say, show me your men.
Yeah.
Show me your men. Man, that was convicting. I'm like,
Yep.
I got a couple guys I'm working with. I mean, we've got to find a younger man, grab a hold of him and say, hey, we want to coach you. 2 Timothy 2:2. Find some men, pour into them, faithful men who also go and replicate that. So that's Jesus' plan. He doesn't have a plan B. Jesus does not have a plan B. He says, go find some young men, disciple them, and pour into them, and they'll pour into others. So we've got to recover that pathway of biblical leadership, Christian masculinity, and it takes courage in today's culture.
I've often said the old dismiss the young ignore the old, and there's too much lost in the middle. And I was talking to some of my peer who late 60s, 70s, and when I was young, I chased guys like Hendricks and Swindoll and Bill Lawrence and Alan Hull and Floyd Sharp that were my seniors. I wanted their knowledge. I wanted a wire brush occasionally to tell me I'm being an idiot.
Yeah.
Do you see that? You're working with young students and men. Do you see that today? Because in my anecdotal experience, fewer men care what older guys think.
Yeah, we see that hunger there. There's a 33% figure that gets thrown around. 33% now of young people growing up in a household with no father figure. So this epidemic of fatherlessness that, think of it, 33% of our young people growing up in a home with no father. It doesn't mean that you can't be a great single mom. It doesn't mean that your life is ruined, but we need a father figure, a coach, an uncle, a grandfather, someone to step in and fill that masculine void. And yeah, there's young guys today that say, I wish there was an older, wiser man, you know, that maybe a guy that's paid the stupid tax, maybe a guy that's got some gray hair that could pour into my life. But they need us to help make that connection. Because I'll speak at a men's weekend retreat or I'll speak at a men's event, and there's some older guys over there grumbling, going, man, I wish I had some younger guys I could disciple. I need a young man that I can pour into. And then I go hang out with the young guys and they're like, man, I wish there were some older guys that could give me some advice. I mean, we got to get these two groups together. We got to make it organic. Hey, you guys go hang out. You go have lunch with that guy. Yeah.
My observation has been the older gentlemen don't have the relational EQ capacity a lot of time. They've got wisdom and experience, but there's a lot of inner voices. What do I have to offer? They're so different than me. Technology and social media are a bridge too far for a lot of these older guys. And the younger guys, and I have a handful of younger guys, Paul, like you do, who they'll chase me. And I'm willing to spend time with them to a measure. But that's a whole nother story, because there's a little bit of an over neediness sometimes. And I think you got to value that too, is like, to be a man means to have courage and take initiative. And, you know, I find my time more checkups than ongoing.
Yeah.
Because they're busy. They're busier maybe than we were at those chapters, but they kind of need a dope slap occasionally. You know, snap out of it, be the man. You know, okay, you're white. And there's certain times and so. Anyway, I digress. But how do you help? Let's talk to the older men, Paul.
Yeah.
How do you help the older guys dial into how do I relate to these 20, 30-somethings who live on their phone, who have very little, let's say, appreciation of an older man to say, what could he give me?
Yeah. I think we got to go to the men's minister. We got to go to an associate pastor and lay out the vision and say, hey, what if we did more intergenerational ministry? What if we got some older guys and mixed them with some younger guys? Because a lot of times there'll be a young guys group, some guys in their 20s, maybe they're meeting for a Bible study. And then there'll be the old Saturday morning pancake breakfast. And that's usually a lot of the older guys getting together, sharing the same old stories. But someone has to disrupt. You know, someone has to go in there and go, hey, we're going to do a little bit more intergenerational ministry for the next season, this fall or this summer. Look, we're going to mix it up and we're going to pair some of you older guys with some of you younger guys. And we have found fantastic results with that. We found even you do a 6-week series or a summer series and say, hey, we're going to have the older guys and the younger guys get together. We're going to share stories. We're going to do some one-on-ones. If you want this, we're going to help facilitate it. Someone has to organize it and help facilitate it. But it can be organic. Say a couple guys want to go fishing and that works well for them and they're good at that, then let them go. But if one of the guys goes, I met with my older guy and we didn't really click. He's more of a CEO. I'm more of a, I want to go fishing at the pond. Well, mix it up. Meet for 6 weeks and then switch it up and find a different guy. But God doesn't want these young guys to live their Christian life alone. This is the problem, this isolated individualism. We're a young guy, it's me and Jesus, it's me and my Bible. We got to walk with other brothers in Christ. We've got to have a brotherhood of guys that are moving in their walk together, as you well know.
One of the churches I served had a very robust security team. And a lot of guys came out of the woodwork. And we had an extraordinary trainer teacher who'd worked both as a Marine and a SWAT officer, and then later as a nuclear waste defense contractor who would go on these sites that were massively vulnerable. And he would, from everything from cameras to fences to, technology and then actual, personnel. And he was a brilliant teacher. And it was so interesting, Paul, because talk about intergenerational. You had older men who were proficient hunters, and a lot of them were sportsmen. A lot of them were, paper target guys. And you had young guys that were just kind of, hey, I get a gun, Yeah. But what happened, what you just articulated, what happened was these guys spent 200 hours over the course of a year training. And the guy leading it would have a small devotion or have someone else give a small devotion. But you saw a relational connectivity that would have never happened outside of that common interest of a shooting range or a CQB class, or how to protect the perimeter of a building, or how to understand watching for suspicious individuals.
Yeah.
And they had close to 100 men.
Wow.
Who met for training, who went off site, who spent money.
Yeah,
on their own money, and it was remarkable to watch. And one of my dear friends who said, I'm not a greeter, I'm not a deacon, I'm not a Sunday school class teacher, but I know how to do this.
Yeah, and you know what? Those young guys never forget those lessons.
100%.
Those guys probably still talk about it. They look back and remember those. But somebody had to be intentional. Someone had to go, let's get these guys together, and that's the call for our pastors, our associate pastors, our youth pastors, our men's ministers. Work at for a season. It doesn't have to be 100%, but do a summer program or do a weekend retreat and get some older guys together with some younger guys so that, I had Chad Hennings talk to me about, he had an old dog, just a sit on the floor old dog, like 9 hours a day, just sitting there on the floor. But guess what he did? He told me he got a puppy. And this puppy, man, was nudging on the older dog and getting him going. And that older dog actually sprang to life and started running around. And it was the younger dog and a young pup and the older dog who started to really run the house and had kind of a camaraderie there. And he said he was shocked that the older dog had that young dog in him kind of come to life. So that's what we're talking about as an illustration is I need an older, wiser guy to pour into me. And I think even, like you just mentioned, the older guy needs a younger guy to maybe, hey, how does this Bluetooth work, and how do I log in? And so, we see that with Paul and Barnabas and Timothy. You've heard that 1,000 times. We all need an older, wiser Paul in our life, a Paul that's pouring into our life. And we need a Barnabas that's a buddy. We go golfing, every Saturday morning or something. And then we need a younger Timothy that we're pouring into. And, somebody says, well, I can't check off all three of those boxes right now. Okay, don't be legalistic about it. But are these the kind of relationships you're building? Are these the friendships you're nurturing? That's what we're talking about.
Hendricks inimically always, what do you want? Because I was very blessed and privileged to be very close to Prof. And I basically was I tried to be very kind but very persistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was one of the few that got to travel with him for a couple of weeks and, quote, carry his bag metaphorically.
Yep.
And, of course, unique, wonderful man. But he didn't have a lot of time for chit-chat.
No.
He wasn't a how about them Cowboys kind of guy, And as a younger man, I had to learn specificity and clarity. What do I want from Prof?
Yeah.
And I think that's another area. And I'm more relational than some guys. I like to be around people, but I can waste time like nobody, Paul. And so for me, when I'm with a younger guy, to be specific, what do you want? And then the next question was, how are you going to get there? Because a lot of this energy, and you tell me, you work with more younger men than I do, but a lot of the energy is just sort of, it's white noise. And they're talking about this, that, and the other. And after a few minutes, I say, hey, tell me about your marriage.
Yep, absolutely.
If they've got 3 kids, I know the wife's stressed out. I know their sex life is probably on problem status. I know they're probably worried about money. They got discipline issues with kids, whatever, sleeping patterns, all that thing. And you ask a guy a specific question like, how's your wife's intimacy? And all of a sudden they go, this is real.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Secondly, they answer.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. They want
answer.
that.
They'll talk about anything if you ask them specifically. And it's all this stuff is backstroke for you and me. You got to date your wife.
Yeah.
You got to take initiative,
And see, I got that in Campus Crusade for Christ at the University of Kansas. I had older guys that were asking me hard questions. So if you had some of that, you want more of it. Like if you got the shot, if you got the inoculation, you're like, man, where's my guys? And these guys would come into your dorm room. They would chase you down like, Pettit, where were you Thursday night? You were supposed to be there. So this is the kind of Christian masculinity that leads, that asks the hard questions, that guys like Prof, who trained up hundreds of guys. I'm thinking of Chip Ingram right now. Chip Ingram used to hang out in Prof's office and like bug Pam Cole, where's Prof? He was supposed to be here. I'm supposed to meet him. And I used to think, man, who's this guy? He's always in here. But then he's doing that with other younger guys in California. So this is the pattern. 2 Timothy 2:2 is easy to remember because it's 2:2:2. Go find a handful of younger guys and pour into them. This is the call. Prof looks at us today and says, show me your men.
Yep.
Show me your men. I'm thinking of Jim Rayburn, who started Young Life. Jim Rayburn was like, I'm going to go find some high school guys and pour into them. And Young Life is all over the world now.
Yep.
This is the pattern of Jesus. Find 12 men, pour your life into them, and then they go find 12 men. So there's no secret method. There's no church growth manual that'll get you there. It is old-fashioned, shoes on the ground, leather on the street. Find 8 or 10 guys and pour your life into them for 3 or 4 years, and then let them go do it.
Is it not discipleship at the core? I mean, it's bottom line. You mentioned Prof and some of these guys like Chip Ingram and I were classmates, and the number of us that, let me say this carefully, but had pretty incredible ministry years, all traced back to Prof.
Absolutely.
You look at Tony Evans, Joe Stoll, Chip Ingram,
Chuck Swindoll. Prof mentored Swindoll. Tony Evans.
So many of these guys, myself included, would say, it was his encouragement. And there were certainly others, that John had. But in that Dallas seminary ecosystem, so many of us were influenced by this guy that was just a broken record on Paul, Timothy, and Barnabas. And okay, let me go back to my earlier topic. What do you say to younger men, because you're dealing with THM students, I guess they're older these days, but a 20, 30-something guy who's a little bit rudderless, maybe he's got a lot of energy, maybe he's got some stuff, but he doesn't have that older guy. How does he find him, Paul?
Well, praying, asking other guys, knocking on somebody's door. They've got to take a little bit of initiative. The thought is, surely one of these guys is going to adopt me or mentor me. But if you're hungry for it, like you and I were, you've got to ask. You've got to approach a guy. I've been told no a few times to my embarrassment. I approached a couple of guys that were in charge of pretty big organizations, And they said, no, I can't really do that. And that hurts a little bit. You're like, wow, that was dumb. I shouldn't have asked him to mentor me, or I shouldn't have asked him, do you have time to coach me occasionally? But move on, like you started with, go find another guy. God is going to bring into your life the right guys at the right season. And, it's like sports. If I'm going to be a little bit better at golf, I got to find a coach. I got to practice. So to answer your question, if I'm 25 years old and I don't have a mentor, you've got to start with that initial courage of approaching a person and asking them. It might work out. It might not. You might click. You might not click. You might move on and find a different guy. But God is not going to abandon you. God is with us. And God is going to bless those efforts of you trying to find someone to mentor you, to coach you, to be a friend. So the problem is in our society, like you said, masculinity itself has become a target. So it's almost easier to hang out with a group of girls, or it's easier just to punt and go, that discipleship these old guys are talking about, that must have been something in the past. But this is 2026. There are ministries today that are coaching and discipling young men. So it can happen today. Discipleship isn't just for the Bible times or just the 1950s. You can find a mentor today. You can find a coach today. Go to your pastor. Go to an elder. There has got to be one or two men in your community that have a burden and a desire to coach up and pour into a young Christian man today. It's a crime for some young guy to want to be discipled and he's not being discipled. That's Prof used to always say, it's a crime to bore people with the Bible. One time I was with Prof and he says, we're going to eat somewhere, and I'm driving around in circles, and he says, what saith thou the prophet? And I'm, what? Well, what he was saying was, you tell me where we're supposed to eat. Dallas. What saith thou the prophet? Everything he said was biblical, as you know. He says,
Hell, not in Gath. That was my favorite. Yeah.
Pettit, what saith thou the prophet? And finally I was like, oh, he's asking where are we supposed to go eat. So we might not have Howard Hendricks today, but you're pouring into young guys. I'm trying to pour into young guys. Chip Ingram's pouring into young guys. There is always a witness. There is always a discipleship pathway. If you're looking for it, you can find it.
I appreciate your mentioning initiative several times now, because as I've coached both pastors and married guys and young guys, that to me is the key starting, is they've got to take initiative. And when I try to encourage young men, because a lot of people want me to mentor them, and I can't do it all. You just can't do it all. And so you use some filtering questions or discerning or whatever. But to me, it's like, I tell guys, it's a little bit like dating. You go out with a guy or gal, and we don't have anything in common. 2 or 3 times, and it's like, well, I like her, but there's no connect. We don't athletics or literature. So you keep trying.
Yeah,
and
nothing
I say,
wrong with
there's
that.
going to be old guys. Secondly, I say, when you find a mentor, I had 5 or 6 formidable mentors, but not one of them was what I call a universal mentor, meaning we didn't have a lot in common, but we had some things extraordinarily aligned. Dr. Alan Hull, who you probably knew through your seminary connections, he was a mentor. He's with the Lord now. Alan, a nephrologist, businessman, brilliant guy, mentored all kinds of physicians and Christian leaders. And he had a way about him where if you're wasting his time, he lets you know it.
Yeah. And what I say is, what are you aiming for? What are your gifts? What are you good at?
What do you want?
Yeah, and go find a guy that's doing what you want to do. So it doesn't have to be a pastor. Some young guys are like,
I think sometimes it's better not to be a pastor. I do, because A, they got a job and a life,
right,
and they can't do it all. And B, some pastors are not the most well-rounded mentors.
Yeah, you might not click with them, but go find, what do you want to do? Well, I want to be in finance. Well, then go find a finance guy that's on fire for Jesus. It doesn't have to be a finance guy that's the worst guy in Dallas, but go find a finance guy that's also like an elder at a church, or teaching a Sunday school class, or walking with Jesus.
Yep.
And you might click and you might not, but move on to then this guy's going to give you good advice.
And that's where the pastor can be resourceful. If you go to him and say, look, I know you're busy and you probably don't have time, but I'm in computer technology, or I'm a physical therapist, so I need some help. I'm a med student. And that's where I think pastors are really great resources, because they know people in the congregation or in the community. The second thing I was going to say is there's mentoring for a time. Because I had certain guys that really mentored me at times of my life. They weren't these ongoing relationships. And it was like they equipped me. Bill Lawrence is a great example. Bill Lawrence really helped me in my pulpit ministry. And he was a wire brush, but it was for my good. And so you need somebody who loves you enough to tell you the truth. But again, back to the young guy, what are you seeing that maybe beyond initiative? What are you seeing that you can say to them, these are 3 things I really want to encourage you? Find the older guy, take initiative. What else would you tell him?
Let me give you 5 struggles that we found in our research. 5 struggles. You're going to be shocked, but this is where young guys are at in 2026. Number 1 would be vaping. Vaping. Do you know what's in this stuff? High levels of THC, high levels of lead. It is not, grandpa's cigars or grandpa's tobacco pipe. Many young men today are struggling with vaping. And number 2 would be drinking, of course. They're pre-gaming. They go to the game, they get drunk, but they want to pre-game. They drink before the game. Then they want to celebrate out. And their buddies, what their buddies are saying? Come on, man, can't you hold your liquor? If you're a real man could drink a whole 12-pack. What's your problem? Number 3 would be gambling. And you're like, Pettit, gambling, what are you talking about? Guess what? It's now online gambling. It's cell phone gambling. Guess what happens? They're in the middle of the game. It's halftime, and they get this ping on their phone. They're like, hey, you're losing, but if you double down right now, if you click this button, you can double your chances in the second half. And guess what their buddies say? Come on, man, do it. Do it, man. Double down. Are you a real man or what? Come on. You going for the Cowboys or not? And these accounts are tied into their credit card. These accounts are tied into their bank account. And these gambling companies, they don't care about these young men. And next thing you know, they're broke. Online gambling is Dave Ramsey calls it the number 1 problem for young men right now, online gambling. Another would be pornography. You always remember the old man goes into a bookstore, comes out with a brown paper bag and a magazine. That's the old days. Guess where pornography is now? Right here. This 25-year-old guy is sitting there clicking on pornography, and it can be addictive. There's a book out that says pornography rewires your brain. And then the last one is a little surprising in our research, but guess what? Out of the top 5, one of the top ones is loneliness. Loneliness. We're hearing that over and over again. A lot of young men, 18 to 26, struggling with loneliness. They don't have one other good friend in which they can confide. They don't have one real buddy that they're doing life with. So just a lot of loneliness out there among young men.
Well, you hold up the phone, and this, even the tablet technology is now passé because everything's driven by the phone. And I walk into a church and everybody's like this. And I was reading, you talked about dopamine and you talk about the rewiring in the brain. The good news is some of the research I've read, whether it's just addiction to social media or pornography or whatever, is that if you detach from it, the brain kind of heals itself in pretty short order. You can get out of it. I'm working with a young man right now that's addicted to porn, and to his credit, he said, I need help. And I'm like, hey, I'm happy to, I'm not a counselor, but let's read a book together, maybe we can sort through it. But the loneliness thing is interesting because this was the portal to relationship and social media, and it had the exact opposite effect, didn't it?
Well, you see these filtered images like, oh, there's Pettit playing golf, man. He's such a cool guy. But they don't see my hard times. They don't see my struggles. I'm not posting, a flat tire. Oh, here I am. I should have got tires, but I got these old tires on my car. Let's post this. No, I post my best moments. And so then other guys see that and go, man, I wish I lived a life like that. I'm not going to hang out with Pettit. He's always speaking at some event or he's writing books. So this social media gives us this weird filtered look at people when they're dressed and clothed and in their right mind. But I'm here to say, young men, it's okay to ask for help. Especially with mental health today, it's okay to say, I'm struggling. And so they see even that goes against our culture. The toxic masculinity is, oh, I tell my wife what to do, and nobody tells me what to do. I got the corner office, and I'm manning up. I don't have any struggles. That's fake. That's phony. All of us have struggles. All of us have low points. And so healthy masculinity, Christ-centered masculinity is saying, I need some help. I'm struggling. I need you to pray for me. I need to meet with you.
Do you think you have to be, I have Christian business leaders, and we all agree with that sentiment. In a secular world, that weakness will get you in trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's different. And even around solid, I have 4 or 5 guys, I said, that know my secrets and I know theirs. Good. And we protect each other in that realm, because I need to be able to say that to Dave or Robert, man, this is really, And as my brother Dave Gibson says, I don't know if you need a dope slap or encouragement, but I'm here for you, And but you can't do that in the marketplace, Paul. And this is the double edge, because let's say I'm a man of integrity, I'm a young guy in a business world, I want to give credit where credit, but guys, I'm really struggling with, you're toast. Right.
Yeah,
you're going to be mowed over. So add the social media influential nonsense on top of that. Here's a guy, of course he's going to be lonely.
Right. But you can find that with a group of guys that are chasing after Jesus Christ, because you could say, hey, we're going to be confidential, but we're also going to be real. And what Prof used to say was, you seldom see a blowout. What you often see is a slow leak. It's not that the guy, boom, all of a sudden he steals money from the company. That wasn't just he didn't get zapped. That was a leak in character that started with several cracks along the way. So we got to get into a small group. Even this book, Courageous Identity, you can use as a small group. Hey, get 5 guys and go, let's go through this book. And that's the time when you start to open up and share and be real with each other and say, hey, I've got some struggles. You've got some struggles. Let's discuss these. Let's lance the wound. Let's talk about it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a professional counselor. There is wisdom in 5 or 6 guys that are focused on Jesus Christ and being honest with each other and saying, I don't want to blow out in the marketplace. I don't want to blow out my marriage. I want to go the distance. And it's not perfection. This is the lie too, that it has to be perfect. No, it's healthy marriage. It's effective fatherhood. There's no such thing as a perfect husband or a perfect dad. It's, can I be effective? Can I be healthy? Can I build a legacy, leave a lasting legacy? Maybe pass a baton that's more healthy than the one that was passed to me.
This is exciting, and I love what you've done here. And again, I've seen a little bit of in my little micro world, I've seen a interest now kind of regaining this idea of masculinity and courage and initiative. We interviewed The Power of Four. His name escapes me right now. Great book. And basically it's a hybrid of what you're talking about, but just with 4 men. Josh Smith, Titus 10, if you're familiar with that, extraordinary book, and along the same line as Courageous Identity, because it's the same thing. Let's do this 4 or 5 guys for the summer. Let's do it for 5 times. Let's get together 5 times and just kick it around. But I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, because I think this is the number one blockade is initiative. Somebody's got to take initiative and be willing to have a couple of no's and still have the courage to keep trying. I don't know if you remember Tarrant County Title Company. He was on the board at Dallas Seminary, remarkable leader. And I was in Grand Prairie, Texas, and I remember reaching out to this guy, and he was no. And I finally got an appointment with him, drove from Grand Prairie to Fort Worth, and he had no time for me.
That's okay. That's okay.
But that's my point. It was like, okay, I learned something here.
Right.
I learned some specificity. What am I looking for? And Bill Garrison.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Bill Hendricks talks about him all the time.
Yep, he was lead follow, get out of my way, dude. And but again, I learned from that experience, and I guess I'm enough of a knucklehead. I just kept pursuing older guys because I knew I needed help, and invariably it was a Paul, Timothy, and a Barnabas. That I had peer. I was great with peer, but I needed people that were ahead of me in their marriage and their finances and God bless me. I look back on my Christian life those are the guys that carried me.
Absolutely.
Certainly, Cindy's prayed for me faithfully more than anybody on the planet, but those men carried me with, you can do this. You can deal with adopted kids. You can deal with chronic pain. You can deal with finances when you're in ministry that you don't make much money. You can do this. This is how it worked for me. And, you know, at the end of the day, that is discipleship, right? Make disciples of all ethnos.
And what happens is a younger guy has to be welcomed into the world of older men. A younger guy who doesn't feel masculine, he may not even feel male, he's got to be accepted into the brotherhood. He's got to be called into masculinity. The researchers call this the male problematic, because young girls, they're already attached to their mother. Most girls feel feminine, but boys have to break away from the feminine. They have to make a break and attach to a father or a father figure. And, you know, in Africa, they'll go into a village and pull a young 9, 10-year-old boy out of the village, literally. It's almost like an enactment. And they'll go away on the men's hunt, and they'll have scarring rituals. You know, they'll have scarring rituals where you're welcomed into the world of men. And here in America, we have very low levels of initiation. I'll ask guys at a weekend retreat, how did you know when you were a real man? What was the moment when you knew you were a real man? And you know what the responses are, Michael, unfortunately? The first time I got drunk, you know, when I got wasted, I knew. Or I've had guys tell me, oh, the first time I slept with my girlfriend. You know, when I slept with my girlfriend, I knew I was a man. How sad is that? And in our culture of evangelicalism, we've got to build initiations. We've got to build like elder pathways. We've got to build leadership pathways where we say, look, when you're 12 years old, when you're 13 years old, we want you to join into the youth group and become a leadership role. When you're 18, 19 years old, we want to say, what's it going to be like if you want to be an elder? We've got to welcome young boys into the world of masculinity, because if the church doesn't disciple them, the world will disciple them.
Did anyone tell you, Paul, you're a man, or when did you learn you were a man?
Well, I had a good father. He was the principal of an elementary school. He didn't have a good father himself. So I kind of grew up watching him golfing, watching him watch sports. I was, a manager on the University of Kansas football team. But really, the guys at Campus Crusade, they really mentored me. And that was one of the first times I took Christianity seriously. A lot of young guys go to church and they think, oh, this is for little old ladies. That's all this is, this church thing. Unless you have a guy you can look up to, a guy you can admire, a guy that will really welcome you into the world and say, hey, let's go out and share our faith on campus. I was scared spitless. What are you talking about? Let's go share our faith. I grew up in church and I was like, what do you mean? Well, we're going to go walk around campus and talk to some people and talk to them about Jesus. Man, I matured really quickly. I got into prayer. That'll increase your prayer life. And then they're like, hey, let's go on a missions trip. Let's go to Kenya and show the Jesus film. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, it'll be 13 weeks. We'll be out in the middle of nowhere. There were no electricity. We used gasoline generators. We're showing there were Muslims throwing rocks at the screen. And man, this gets you where you're like, being a Christian is more than just sitting in a circle and, knitting. This is about doing God's work in the world. This is about God asking me to step out in faith and try something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. This is men going to a widow's house and helping her fix her fence. This is young men helping a single mom fix her car. This is the call of masculinity: service, loving service, authentic leadership. This is the call of Christ-centered masculinity, helping those who are brokenhearted, helping those who are hurting. Jesus says, I'll be a father to the fatherless. But how's that going to happen? He's going to use guys like me and you. You and I are going to be the father to the fatherless. And God the Father is omniscient. He's omnipresent. He's spirit. But he's using you and I, flesh and blood, to be the father to the fatherless and to mentor younger people. And there's that scripture passage that everybody avoids today, and that is older women, let the older godly women disciple the younger women. You don't hear, that's not a popular verse these days. You don't hear that very often. Let the older, wiser women mentor and disciple the younger women. The Apostle Paul that's scripture. That's truth. And the inverse of that is, let the older, wiser men mentor the younger men. So, that's not a popular thing to say in 2026. All these groups have to be co-ed. All these groups have to have men and women. But there is a season, there is a time where young men really need an older, wiser group of men and just have some learning time.
When I was at Dallas, we had to write a 30-page philosophy of ministry paper. And I can't remember the class, but it was like a third of the grade. And I poured heart, soul into that paper. I took it super seriously. I probably got a good grade on it. And I finished, and no one ever asked me what was my philosophy of ministry. But that was sort of the drumbeat in that era. And so about 4 or 5 years into the second church probably the first church I served, I came up with what I called the thumbnail philosophy of ministry. It was everybody needs a friend. Everybody's under-encouraged. Everyone is insecure. Everyone needs undivided attention, and lead but don't drive.
Wow, I like that.
And I would recite that to myself over and over and over again, and I shared it with lots of people over the years. And I have a little cadre of guys that I still, meet with occasionally through Zoom and whatnot. And the number of guys, Paul, that will talk about everybody's under-encouraged. It's impossible to over-encourage someone. And to me, it's pretty simple. But I still think it goes back to what you said earlier. It's initiative.
Absolutely.
And you got to ask, is if God has me here on this planet, I may not be the big whatever in my field or the most successful or wealthiest, but I can be a father to the fatherless. I can be a mentor to some young knucklehead who needs somebody to either give him a dope slap or encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And say, as a young man, you've got power. I still remember, and it was late in life. Now, I had a great dad, great work ethic. I'm not whining about that. But Dennis Rainey, I was in my 40s, and I was working with Family Life at the time. And Rainey looked me in the eye with his hands on my shoulder, says, Easley, you're the man. No one had ever said that to me. And
absolutely.
Like, oh, okay, I'm fighting back tears. I'm a man? And coming from him, who I really esteem, Dennis is a courageous dude. Coming from him, I was like, wow, I kind of stood up a little straighter. And then the other benefit I want to say, and then I got to let you go, and I need to go, is as these relationships grow, I remember when I was the student idiot to prof. I remember when I was a mentee, and then we became friends.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You live long enough.
Yeah.
Where that mentor becomes your peer.
Yeah.
And that's gold. That's
absolutely. Gold. It's like a shot of masculinity in the arm.
Yep.
It's him saying, I welcome you into the world of manhood.
Yep.
I see a future in you. They call you out. They say you can do this.
Yep.
And there's a lot of young men that need that today.
And that's a vista. That doesn't happen overnight. But Paul, I appreciate the book, A Courageous Identity, Accepting the Call of Christ-Centered Masculinity. Folks, we need men. We need young men to step up. And I want to encourage you to find some courage, but also to smile. I think we're in such a caustic, vitriolic world culture where men are vilified. And I know this is not going to play well. White men especially. We're getting beat up at every level for every little thing. And to disarm, to smile. I appreciate that perspective. We have a different point of view. I can see your point. I understand. But let me tell you, and then smile and state your position lovingly, kindly, courageously, firmly. You can still be gentle and firm in the same sentence. And I think that's a learned skill, just like going on campus and knocking on a dorm room door. It's a learned skill, but you can learn it. So pick up Paul's book anywhere online you purchase resources. As always, information about our guests are in the broadcast notes. Paul, God bless you. Thanks for taking some time to come on and talk about your new book.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.
You bet.